Jesus did what he did so well one more time in Luke 13, and that is he got into trouble. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. The leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. So ends the reading of God's holy word. Invite us to pray. Gracious God, we can find ourselves in many different points in this drama, in this scene. Perhaps we're the woman. Perhaps we're someone who has carried a burden for many years. Perhaps we're the crowd wondering just exactly what Jesus will do. Perhaps we're even the synagogue official who is really just enforcing the rules and the expectations of the day. Help us, no matter where we find ourselves in this scene, oh God, to be blessed, and in the pondering of it, to find ourselves freer to love and be loved. This we ask in your holy name. Amen. Anybody who's ever had back problems knows how debilitating they can be. Like so many parts of the human body, when the back is working well, we practically forget about it. But when our back hurts, there's no hiding it. We're going to know about it. And it's a good bet that some of the people around us are going to know about it too. Not only can a bad back bring pain, but our very outlook on life can be wrenched downward, so that it can be hard to even imagine things ever looking up again, as was the case with this woman whom Christ encountered. Way back in my late 20s, I threw out my back. Fortunately, I didn't throw it too far. And I found it again in a couple of days. I can't imagine 18 years. I think by about the 6th year, I'd probably give up any hope of ever standing erect again. By year 14, maybe I'd question whether I even deserved to be healed. And by the 18th year, I doubt I'd even bother to ask for help, even from the Son of God, maybe. So it's no surprise that the woman doesn't call out for help to Jesus. He calls to her. Such is the nature of chronic suffering sometimes, whether physical or emotional. After a long enough time, we not only give up hope, we give up any sense of deserving any better. And sadly, there are plenty of people that will agree with this. This woman was probably seen staggering around the community for years. Maybe longer than most folks could remember. And that's just the way she is. Poor old Marge. So to even suggest that it be otherwise would be really unthinkable, maybe even a little frightening. I once had a dream years ago, it was really kind of a nightmare, in which a friend of mine who in real life suffered from the paralyzing effects of muscular dystrophy in the dream, walked up to me and started to talk to me. It was terrifying. As much as I'd hoped and prayed for Mark to be healed, daily almost, when I actually witnessed it in a dream, it was so strange that it was scary. Change, even good change, is often met with maybe a mix of suspicion or fear or anger. Maybe because time has a way of legitimating almost anything. If something's been the case long enough, it begins to acquire a certain validity. It's sort of like squatters' rights. You stay on the property long enough, even if you don't own it legally, after a while you're deemed the rightful owners. And if a woman inhabits a contorted body long enough, it can begin to seem almost ordained. As though to say, well, she's always been that way, it must be God's will. And that's when complacence can set in, not only in her, but in the people around her. And it can take somebody like Jesus to say, oh no, it's not God's will. I ought to know. Woman, you are set free from your ailment. Good for the woman. Good for Jesus. But not necessarily good for everyone else. Now that newly healed woman just might start asking for a spot in the pickleball league. Or show up to try out for the community chorus. Or worst of all, she might start proclaiming what God did for her. It was so much easier when she was a meek little hunchback. But no, Jesus had to go and heal her. And on the Sabbath, no less. Now, to be fair, the leader of the synagogue was only doing his job. Really. The Sabbath observance was a central pillar of the Jewish faith. It was a day of quiet rest and renewal. And a very ancient institution. One that was taken very seriously. But institutions, for all their venerable strength, can sometimes get so big and heavy and laden with restrictions that they can crush the life out of precisely those they're intended to help. Bear with me, I've mentioned this one before, but there's a certain swimming pool down in Florida where a sign greets all would-be swimmers with this warning: no running, no jumping, no diving, no splashing, no eating, no yelling, and no kidding. Not the no kidding, I added that. But they weren't kidding. In order to ensure utter safety in the pool area, such were the rules. But to what effect? You had to slip into the pool like an otter and stay submerged so as not to offend anyone. How fun is that? Might as well grab a deck of cards and play poker. Well, against the rules, Jesus healed on the Sabbath out of deep compassion. Evidently, this woman's condition was quite obvious. Sometimes the pain isn't so evident. And yet it's just as wrenching, just as burdensome, bending us so low that our eyes can't even see the sunny side, let alone keep on the sunny side. And I believe it's Jesus that calls to us then, no matter how hidden our affliction, inviting us to release our affliction, our burden, to get something off our back, off our chest, and also calling us to help others to lay down theirs. It's inspiring to see Christ in action, anywhere, but especially right here in Ontario County. My weekly circuit tends to be fairly small, but even in my limited rounds, I had the chance to witness some beautiful compassion offered to those who carry pretty heavy burdens. One example that stands out from recently, very vivid. It's watching folks at the M.M. Ewing Continuing Care Center filing into the facility using walkers and canes and wheelchairs. They're not residents, they're visitors, even in the winter. It's inspiring. People with their own burdens seeking to lessen the burdens of others. Another example, I must be on a pool thing. Rotary Sunshine Camp, where young camp counselors, often with their own special needs, such as deafness, cerebral palsy, diabetes, bending over backwards to make sure some of these campers have a summer they will treasure all their life. And there is, as I've mentioned before, probably 7 years ago, nothing quite like the face of a child with muscular dystrophy getting weightless for the first time. For a few minutes, they enjoy a break from that incessant downward pull of gravity that for a lot of them makes it almost impossible to lift a finger. For a little while, they're buoyant in body and, I gotta tell you, in spirit. If Jesus wasn't in that pool, I don't know who was. But as anyone familiar with disabilities can tell you, it's not all about summer camp and swimming in the pool. Attending to the needs of others often means making waves in other ways. The Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990 did not please a lot of people initially when it became law. If you owned a business, a restaurant, or a church, it was a pain in the neck, and often an expensive one. You know, a lot of people got pretty bent out of shape. At least as bent out of shape as that woman that Jesus healed. There are a whole lot of people these days who are severely crippled by unjust, not to mention cruel policies and practices. People in our country, people at the edge of our country, people all around the planet. But there are also, happily, an awful lot of folks who stand up and speak out for the sake of our brothers and sisters. Some of these folks are right here in this church. Thanks be to God. None of them is perfect. They aren't Jesus Christ, but the efforts they engage in bring not just rest and relief and renewal, but respect. Sometimes these efforts to lift the burdens of others happen through governments and churches and other institutions. Sometimes they happen in spite of them. As with Jesus healing in the synagogue on the Sabbath. The needs are many these days. It might be a woman carrying water for miles because there's no money to dig a well. So she has to keep carrying water and not be able to work and earn money for her family. It might be a person freighted with shame due to a police record that seems to be living out that endless sentence. It could be someone persecuted for being gay, or someone abused or addicted. Sometimes our institutions lead the way, sometimes they get in the way. Jesus didn't seem to care. He was there to lighten the load of all who suffer. Every once in a while we sing that old hymn, stand up for Jesus. And while we're at it, maybe we can help someone else stand up too. Because once everyone can stand up, then things are really looking up.